Hey there, this is Andrew, and I wanted to make a video here at my friend's recommendation, just talking about how I ended up on the Alliance build that I did that recently won me the Keyforge Alliance National Championships. And this isn't it, by the way. This is the one I played in at Keyforge Celebration. So I'll talk a little bit about this, how I got to the new build, what's different about it, and then how the event went. But first, I wanted to give a few just acknowledgments of people that have been really helpful along the way. And I'm sure I'm going to miss some people too because really, I didn't do this in isolation. So I'm sure I'm going to miss some people, but uh, that's the nature of this sort of thing. But first, I want to thank my wife Jenny, who supported me in going out and actually participating in the event. I took both our daughters with us, so that was really fun. But I probably wouldn't have done it if she hadn't been so supportive of me going out and doing it. And then the next person on the list has to be Joe Exoded from my team, Ancient Bear Republic. I say my team. I'm a member. Joe's really the Joe and G are really the Papa Bears. But anyway, a huge thanks to Joe for lending me actually two pods from this original version that I did, and then this one, the Mars stayed. So, and it's a really unique pod, and so I don't think I'd be where I am without him loaning me that pod. So thanks to Joe, and then a big thanks to Ned Mike, also from the Ancient Bear Republic team, who sold me this Logos pod very reasonably. He just wanted to help, so that was super fun. And then also big thanks to Gorlami, who loaned me the other two pods that I used in the build for Nationals. Who else? Big thanks to Shaka, who has just been a great ear and tester throughout all this. He, I think, originally convinced me that I should get away from the stuff I was trying to work on and try working on one of these Martian Generosity builds. And then Bear, who I did some recent testing with, that kind of unlocked some secrets of the deck for me that I used to win. I would not have been able to get through the semifinals without a trick that I learned in a game against Bear. And also, he's also from Ancient Bear Republic, so Shaka, and then Mark H, who has just been a really good sounding board for ideas. And then I also should thank Glorfindale, my friend, who suggests I do this video because he's also just been a really good sounding board for ideas and constant input. So that's been really helpful. And again, I'm sure there are others that I'm missing here. Honestly, I'm really grateful to all my opponents that I played this past weekend because I learned from every single one of them and did better on day two than I did on day. I played better on day two because of stuff I had learned on day one from great opponents who really pushed my limits. So, all right, all that mushy gushy stuff out of the way. Let's talk about the deck. So the pod part that's consistent here, I'll go over that first, is from Der Serglos Acrobat. I can't even say the whole name. It's a German deck that Joe acquired a while back, and it uses so it has two Martian Generosities. That's that with the key abduction is the obvious thing that'll stick out to most players. So for people who aren't aware of this combo, the kind of insane combo that is the chase combo from AOA for sure is to play Martian Generosity, which gains you an amber and then has you lose all your amber and then draw 2 cards for every every amber that you lost, which can add up to a lot of cards. And then Key Abduction, which gives you an amber and then has you return all your Mars creatures to your hand, Mars creatures go to your opponent's hand too, and then you may forge a key at +9 the current cost, reduced by 1 for each card in your hand. So that adds up to a 15 amber key cost, but then when you reduce it by 1 for every card in your hand, after having drawn a good portion of your deck, usually end up getting to forge for free. That's the dream anyway, and some decks can do it really reliably, some decks struggle a little more. A lot of it boils down, a lot of what makes a good Martian Generosity deck is having some way to generate a lot of amber during your Mars turn, because otherwise you are kind of dependent on having some stored up. And in Alliance, it's difficult. If you're expecting to start a turn with amber, you might be disappointed because everybody else is playing crazy stuff, and the high end of control that shows up in Alliance is very controlly. Jared running a mass mutation deck had a jar, Mark of Dis, in multiple, I think 2 or 3 Infernuses, a Snarette that's capturing 1 at the end of every turn, Fiends that steal. I mean, it was intent. A Drekker. So really a lot of control. So if I'm planning on starting a turn with amber, that's going to be rough. I need a way to actually get into the combo on the Mars turn. So how do you do that? Well, Mars First helps, Brainstem helps, Mars Needs Amber can help some, although in this particular pod, there's not a great way to convert the Mars Needs Amber into actually having amber, right? Because yeah, your opponent, I mean, you get the 1, but your opponent might capture a bunch from themselves. But if you can't kill those creatures, then what can you do? So actually, if I could add 1 card to this deck, it would be like either a Carpet Flotsam or a Flotsam Spike, probably, to turn the Mars Needs Amber. I mean, honestly, if I could, it'd be amazing to have like a Carpet Flotsam Spike and Mars Needs Amber. But the Brainstem likes having all the creatures too. So I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to reliably fire, actually. But the dream is that once you fire and you draw a lot of cards into your hand, then the second Martian Generosity doesn't even need to have as much amber to be able to pick up the rest of your deck. Now, at that point, you've played 2 Martian Generosities. You have your entire deck in your hand, except for 1 Martian Generosity in the discard. And so at that point, if you play Key Abduction, you forge for free, and then if you play Martian Generosity, you get to draw the Key Abduction and the other Martian Generosity back, and you just loop that. You don't even need to hit Rule of 6 on the Martian Gen. If it works out perfect, you only need to play it 4 or 5 times, and you'll have forged out with the Key Abduction. Okay, so that's pretty great. So what are the things that can go wrong? This is how I thought about this, because that's kind of the core thing that I was building around. And so what do I need to make it work? Well, there's 2 things I want, right? One is I want to make it fire more reliably, and the other is I want to answer any roadblocks that my opponents are going to put in my way. And so let's talk about acceleration first, and we'll look at this Untamed pod first, because the Untamed pod is really all acceleration, almost all. So there are 2 Nepenthe Seeds here. Nepenthe Seed is just such an amazing card because it's so generically good. Omni, sacrifice it, return a card from your discard pile to your hand. So it works on your Logos or Mars turns. It feeds the combo, because if what you need is more amber, it lets you, for example, bring back Mars First, get another 2 amber that way before you fire the Martian Gen. Or if what you need is to just get the key abduction back, it can do that. If you need to get the Martian Gen back, it can do that. It's just an incredible card, Nepenthe Seed is, for enabling a combo like this. So having 2 of them is amazing. Glimmer also can return a card, so that's pretty bonkers. And notice there is only 1 Glimmer here, so really in this whole deck, we only have 1 card with Alpha. So it doesn't feel bad to play the Glimmer first. You're not having to decide between different things. You just play the Glimmer first, that's it. Dusk Witch is also amazing because your opponent has to deal with it. If Dusk Witch is left on the board, then suddenly it's so much easier to generate a lot of amber in your Mars turn, and you can punish them too hard. So they have to do something about it, which often means they're taking a turn to do something other than what they had wanted to do. Now, it's a little tough against these these mass mutation decks that have a lot of pips. Usually they just are able to hit it with a pip. And so that reduces the effectiveness of it, but it's still great. It's still a big threat. So it's nice when it works, and when it doesn't, it's okay. You tried. The Nature's Call and They're Everywhere can be a little bit defensive. Full Moon can also be really aggressive, which is nice. And well, I'll cover that. I think before this event, I undervalued Full Moon, and if it comes up in the right order, it can be really amazing. Okay, then so let's talk a little more about the aggressive part of this Logos side. Again, They're Everywhere and Nature's Call can be a little bit defensive. Lupo 2, Key Charge can give you a backup if Key Abduction is gone, but it's harder to do. But most of the defense is going to be in the Logos here. Actually, I guess I'll really only have 1 defense card. I'll get to it. So in this Logos, what we have, again, for aggression is Knowledge is Power and Lab Work to archive. If the opponent doesn't have a way to knock cards out of archives, then archiving a Martian Gen early is just amazing. Feels so good because you're just like, I can just keep digging for the rest of the combo and it's fine. The Igors are amazing. Remote access is actually really helpful. I was able to at Keyforge Celebration, I was actually able to once remote access an opponent's Nepenthe Seed. That felt super good. But yeah, Igor is amazing for digging through. Researcher actually is a really nice. That's a little bit of defense after an Igor. If you had to discard something you didn't want to, you can pick it back up that way. Although you have to have it at the right time, but it can be very nice. Otherwise, it's just aggressive. Archive the top card of your deck when you play it. That's great. You have 2 helper bots, and these are amazing. The helper bots are super good because what they let you do is they let you play out more of your hand, so now you're going to draw more cards. They allow you to set up so a Logos turn where you play 5 cards and helper bot a Nepenthe Seed or a Dusk Witch or both feels amazing because now you've emptied your hand and you've set up these intense threats that are going to enable your combo harder. So you're enabling your combo on the board and you're drawing more cards. It just feels so good. And then now I'll say the pod. I don't think this ever came up at Keyforge Celebration, but there was definitely a game at Nationals where I should have done Helper Bot Full Moon. Like my first 2 cards I played should have been Helper Bot, or I think I played Igor and drew the Full Moon maybe, but I should have done Helper Bot Full Moon next because then I played a bunch of other Logos cards and I would have actually generated enough amber to be able to fire the Martian Generosity combo out of Logos. And that's the crazy thing about this package is with these helper bots, you can fire the Mars out of Logos, which means even like a mark of Dis might not be enough to stop you from winning. So that's really cool. But again, I misplayed by not thinking of that in the moment, and that was actually in game one of the finals, and I realized at the end of the turn, oh, I should have done that, and it was just too late, and that's, no takesies backsies. So I managed to win that game anyway, but felt pretty bad to be at the end of the turn and be like, I really should have played Full Moon. Okay, so and then Sutterkin is kind of incredible with the brainstem, and it's not obvious necessarily, but when it hits, it's just devastating. So yeah, it's pretty great. And obviously, if you have Duskwitch on the board and you get to play Sutterkin, that's amazing too. I think there was a game once where I played Sutterkin, reaped, helper botted, Nature's Call, and got to Sutterkin Reap again because of Duskwitch. I mean, there's just crazy stuff you can do. Okay, and then the defensive card here is Neutron Shark, because the thing that this deck dies to, pretty obviously, is an Etan's Jar. Because if someone Etan's Jars that Martian Generosity, it's not that you can't combo out, but it's much more difficult to combo out at that point. And so, yeah, that's a rough situation. And what are you going to do? But yeah, the Neutron Shark is pretty important for being able to kill a jar. Now, if the opponent has 2 jars, which I know of somebody who has a 2-jar build, they have a Maverick Etan's Jar. I guess they jar the shark and then they jar the Martian Gen, and then that's pretty tough. But in most situations, Neutron Shark gets you out of the bind. It's also pretty nice for getting rid of other threats. One of the nice things about this is all these cards are generically good. So yes, Martian Gen with Key Abduction is an amazing combo. But Martian Gen is good even if you don't get the Key Abduction. Mars First is good even if you don't have Martian Generosity. Duskwitch is good even if you don't have Sutterkin. Nepenthe Seed is good even if you didn't draw the Martian Gen. Neutron Shark is good even if your opponent didn't play Etan's Jar. So the crazy thing is here, there's just not very many cards that aren't generically good. And so if you've ever listened to or read any content talking about silver bullets, there's this idea of a silver bullet where, okay, there's this strong card in a card game, and so let's make a card that just counteracts that. And if it's too specific, it kind of leads to a situation where, okay, if they happen to draw that card, then you just don't have any chance. Otherwise, but if they're playing that card against a deck that it doesn't answer, then it's a worthless card. But here, that's just not the case at all. All of these cards are good all the time, and yet in specific situations they are completely clutch. So that makes for a really strong deck. Okay, so that's what I used at Keyforge Celebration. Now, I felt like I wanted a different Untamed, and part of it was I had chosen not to use, and I guess this is another thing I should add to Rise from Ancient Bear Republic. He had been pushing me to use his Untamed pod that has 3 mimicries. And I ended up going with this one because I wanted the 2 Nepenthe Seeds. But I definitely, when I lost to like 3 Control the Weeks into Untamed in a row in the semifinals at Keyforge Celebration, I felt like, wow, I wish I had a mimicry. So I started looking into other Untamed pods. And I also just felt like, okay, at this point I own the Logos. I can't get anything like this Mars. It doesn't exist. But and anything even close is really expensive. But quite like this just doesn't exist. So what can I do here? Okay, let's see if I can find. Let's work on the Untamed. And so I started looking into that, and ended up coming across and I ended up coming across a deck that happened to have Heart of the Forest. And for those of you who don't know, Heart of the Forest is a controversial card that uh, it's an artifact that says uh, while a, if you have more keys than your opponent, you can't forge, and it applies to both players. So if one player has 0 keys and the other has 1, the player with 1 key can have all the amber in the world and they can't forge. They can't key cheat. They just, it's not skips the forge step. It's just you can't forge. And so, and I thought that's kind of funny, but this pod looks good otherwise. Let me try it. And I realized it was kind of by accident. And I've talked to people since then who've been like, "Wow, that's genius! What a genius addition!" And I have to admit, I just stumbled on it. So that's, I guess, a good plug for just testing a lot of things, because I would not have, there's just no chance I would have thought to do that without just being testing a lot of different things. And so I ended up looking up a lot of pods that had Heart of the Forest, and I bought one, but it wasn't going to get here on time. And so I was scrambling, how do I get one from my locals here in San Diego to borrow? And I found this one from Gorlami, and I reached out to him and said, "Hey, can I borrow this?" And he said, "Sure. And have you thought about that Logos pod I showed you?" And I was like, okay, I guess I'll check that out again too. And so here we are. So here's the Untamed pod. I'll show you that first that I grabbed. And notice it has a lot similar. It has a full moon. It has a key charge. It has 2 Dusk Witches. It only has 1 Nepenthe Seed, and that's kind of interesting. Only 1 Nepenthe Seed. No, what's it called? No, They're Everywhere. So that's a little tough, but yeah, it also it has a mimicry, which is really nice. I wished I had a mimicry. And Song of Spring, I hate. I wish I could replace that. Oh well. And Amberspine Mongrel is an interesting one, because if you're trying to set up the Martian Gen combo, do you go to 5, do you want your opponent to be able to force you up to 6 and forge? That's a little rough, but it's interesting at least. So okay, let's do that. And it has this Heart of the Forest. So yeah, I just kind of realized the Heart of the Forest is actually really good here, because what it means is the other thing that, besides your opponent playing something that just says, no, you can't do what you want to do, the other thing that can go wrong with this setup is drawing into things too late, not getting to fire your combo. And Heart of the Forest is a great single card protection against that. If you just stop making amber, the Heart of the Forest will drag the game out while you set up your combo. And so that's pretty great. Now, of course, the Logos tries to help get to the combo, but Heart of the Forest is a really nice backstop that, okay, I can at least just not lose while I set up the combo. And the first rule of winning is don't lose. So, okay, so that ended up being pretty amazing. And then I did decide to go with Gorlami's Logos pod. And the reason is there are 2 big improvements. The biggest one is Dysania. And what I found is actually a lot of the decks that I'm most afraid of, which are actually J Powers decks, they like to archive. So his decks have two Cronuses with draw pips on the Cronuses. The deck J Power played has 2 draw pips on each Cronus. The deck Jared played had 2 on one of them and 1 on the other, and then a bunch more draw pips. So So Dysania actually gives me a way to punish that, or at least disincentivize it, which is really good. And then the other really nice thing here is actually the Bouncing Death Quirk, which gives an additional way. Neutron Shark, it's amazing because it can remove an artifact. But it's a little unreliable because who knows what you'll discard from the top of your deck. And Bouncing Death Quark is more reliable. As long as you have creatures out, and these decks are actually pretty good at spamming creatures, the Bouncing Death Quark can fire. Now it's missing, gives up the Sutterkin and the Researcher, but the Research Smoko is pretty good, and the Seismo Entangler actually is pretty good too. And then Titan Librarian is very nice. If you can get Titan Librarian on the board, it's actually a pretty nice feature to help set up the combo because you can get several turns in a row of Archive out of it, which is amazing. So this is what I ended up using. Now looking at these side by side, you can see, yeah, again we're down in a Penth Seed, but we're down the They're Everywheres, but they're similar in a lot of ways. We're down a remote access, a Sutterkin, and a Researcher, but up a Dysania, Seismo Entangler, and a Bouncing Death Quirk. So and the Librarian. So yeah, they're really similar builds, but Dysania ends up being a nice pressure. And one of the things I found, okay, couple interesting things. One is, I'll say, I actually think this deck on the right that I played at Alliance, at Nationals, is a little slower because it does not have the Sutterkin and it does not have the Researcher. So I actually think it doesn't have two Nepenthes. So I think this deck on the right is a little slower, and so it needs the heart a little more than the deck on the left. Whereas the deck on the left doesn't necessarily need the heart as much because it's a little more aggressive. So I sacrifice some aggression for some defense. But when you're playing against insane control decks, that's kind of necessary. And J-Power's control decks are insane control decks. I mean, they are so brutalizing. So, okay, I found, especially against Winds of Exchange, this Heart of the Forest is incredible. Winds of Exchange can spray creatures onto the board and start reaping with them in ways that are just unconscionable, and having the heart there just says I can not care. I can choose to not care and play my game and ignore all that stuff that you're doing. It's great, but I can ignore it for now. Now, of course, artifact control is a great answer to that, and both the WoE decks that I almost lost to had artifact control. So, so it's not like the game is not interactive. I'm not playing solitaire. I'm trying to play solitaire, but I can't because my opponent keeps doing stuff to mess me up. But the Heart of the Forest provides a really important backstop to stop me from losing. And then the Dysania against the Mass Mutation Super Archive decks is amazing because it pushes them to play differently. So, so these guys are smart enough to not get hit by the Dysania, to not give me 12 amber to a Dysania play, but they're now playing less efficiently because of that, and that's a huge benefit. So I actually think Dysania ends up being a pretty critical card for that reason. Okay. So, and yeah, it ended up great. It was just a great setup. So let's talk then about how games went. So, and you'll have to forgive me, there's a couple people whose names I did not catch. And it's not because you weren't great or a tough matchup or interesting. It's just, it was a long day, and in one case, our interaction was so short, I don't know what to tell you. So my round one, and because of the double elim, there not very many people played round one, but I got the whatever straw, long or short, makes you play on round one, and so I played round one. And when I sat down, the guy said, "Hey, I'm actually going to drop after this round, so I I plan to concede, but but I didn't want to leave you hanging without a game to play, so here I am." And I was like, "Okay, well, just we'll see. I'm not gonna play differently because you said that. I'm still gonna play the way I normally would." And he said, "I totally get it." And I managed to combo out on turn 3. That was the only time this entire event that I had that happen, and it was I had an amazing draw, and just I was able to generate enough amber on turn 3 to fire the combo, forge 3 keys, and GG. And anyway, the guy, I think he wanted to head out anyway, and he was really kind and a great. He played well. I think he knew he didn't have a really competitive alliance deck, and anyway, he was really kind and generous. So yeah, it was a fun game, and but it was so short. I the name did not get stuck in my head, so I'm so sorry, Turn One guy. You're awesome, and I hope to see you at an event in the future. Round 2 was against J Power, and I felt like how in the world is this fair? Okay, I guess I have to just get this done. And J Power, if you don't know, is the guy to beat because he won at Keyforge Celebration and he won at the Philly Vault Tour, so he is definitely the guy to beat. And he's updated his deck since Keyforge Celebration, but we'd actually never played at one of these events because it was Jared who knocked me out in the semifinals at Keyforge Celebration. Um, so we played and I won, but I had a misplay in there that I really learned from, and it was and I should say if you get a chance to play against J Power, the you know if you can get him to talk to you after the game, which I think you should be able to. You can do that if you ask. He just has great ideas and is very helpful. So we were playing, and I had a turn where I played Martian Gen, and this is I think good if you're going to play any kind of combo deck like this. Really helpful information. So I played Martian Gen, and it drew through into my discard pile. And the problem with that is now I have a deck with a bunch of cards still in it, and then I have Martian Gen in my discard, which means if I'm going to get that first Martian Gen back, I need to draw through my whole deck and back into it. And I wasn't able to generate enough amber to do that. I was a few amber short, and that meant I left the Martian Gen sitting there. Now I did play the second one. I think I played the second one, um, and I was able to get I had enough cards in my hand that I was able to just pressure and forge. Um, and so I won, and I think he had 1 key, but uh, I was in a dangerous situation if he had drawn better and had the answers because I hadn't done the math. And I talked to him about it afterwards, and he said, in hindsight, probably you made the right decision to just go for it, but you should have known that was going to happen. If you had known that was going to happen and made a conscious choice to do it, then it's a correct then it's possibly a correct play. But if you don't realize it's going to happen, maybe you count that as a play mistake or a misplay just because you didn't think it through. And anyway, that's totally accurate. And so I really appreciated him saying it that way. Um, so I did manage to win that, but learned a really valuable lesson that I used in other games because in other games throughout day 1 and into day 2, uh, I found myself in these situations where I needed to draw through, and I counted, and there was actually there's actually a game on day 2 where I thought I had Mars first. I didn't, but my intention was to play Mars first without a creature on the board, so that Martian Gen would get me to exactly 5, and I had 10 cards in my deck, and that would have drawn me exactly to the end of my deck, which would have, and then I knew I could combo and draw everything with my second Martian Gen. So I thought I had timed it right, and it ended up I didn't have Mars first, so that was another mistake. But I tried. Anyway, this was a really valuable lesson, and I used it. And if you're doing this kind of combo, if you can again count it, time it, so that you can guarantee that you draw back into your stuff, it's or give yourself a better chance to, you'll benefit from that. Okay. So that was round 2. Then I played against Jared in round 3, and and I lost. So both my organized play alliance losses are to Jared. At Keyforge Celebration, it was him playing a Battlefleet Key Abduction with a lot of Control the Weaks monstrosity, but here it was to a mass mutation Logos Accelerator with 3 subject Kirby's, and then a bunch of Infernuses, and a Mark of Dis, and a jar. And I ended up, a big part of why I lost this because I dropped big creatures on the board and they got Mark of Dist. Another big problem I had is I drew a few Mars cards early that I didn't want to get rid of, and I should have just let them go. Like Xanthix Harvester, I really wanted to hold on to. I should have played, and so that slowed my draw down significantly. So that was on me. Dropping a big creature was on me. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that I would have won if I hadn't made those errors, but I realized after the fact those were errors that contributed to my loss. And as far as I could tell, I don't think Jared made a single mistake that game. So, and I'll say that with both Jason and Jared, you just can't plan on them making a mistake. So, yeah, so he took advantage of whatever combination of deck composition, draw, and me making a couple bad choices, he capitalized on and just controlled me into the ground, and I lost. So then I went to the loser bracket. I had a round 4 bye. In round 5, I played against Justin from Tabletop Royale, and he was playing a control setup in Unfathomable with a warrior token and multiple brick nasties. Yeah, and then an Echodon setup with Buggy, which is really interesting and efficient, and he also had auction off. So that ended up being he just started racing and got ahead. I was able to mimicry his befuddle, which helped a lot. That was actually pretty intense. And he said afterward that he wished he had abyssal sided something else, and he said he wished he had abyssal sided the mimicry because he had befuddle in his discard pile. So befuddle ended up being really helpful there. That I think saved me a turn because I pushed him into Echodon, and he just kind of drew some stuff. But again, with the Buggy, it wasn't a bad turn. He got some acceleration out of it. And then I got Heart down, which, interestingly, his last turn, he went to 8 Amber for key 3. So the Heart never actually stopped him forging a key. But he said, and I totally believe this, that he played differently because the Heart was on the table. So because there was Heart on the table, he was digging for auction off and steering that direction in his play, which probably opened up a little space for me to be able to get into my combo and fire it off. So even though Heart never technically stopped him from forging a key because I was able to combo out, it still changed his play style, which was a big benefit to me. And same like well, yeah, I'll talk about Dicey more later. So anyway, that was a great game. Felt very close, but I was able to get in the combo and launch it off. And then in round 6, I played against Zach, the Noble One. He was playing another WoW deck. He was playing Control and Unfathomable, shocking, and with Abyssal Sight, Befuddle. He had a Prospector token, an Equidon with Auction Off again, excellent, and he had an FOF transponder with that Prospector, which was really cool. And then he also had a Star Alliance, Star Alliance setup, and he got way ahead on Amber to the point where Heart definitely saved me. And on his final turn, he auctioned off my Heart. And the interesting thing there actually is that pushed me to 6 Amber, which caused me to forge my second key. And so had he auctioned off my Nepenthe Seed instead, it would have also pushed me to 6, which would have made the Heart irrelevant. And so I definitely would say it was strictly a better choice for him to auction off the Nepenthe Seed, and he missed that. And I know because he and Z came up and were talking to me about it afterward. I know he was kicking himself for that a little bit. The truth is, I was able to generate enough Amber and draw that I think I would have been able to win anyway, because I drew into Brainstem and was able to generate enough Amber that I think I would have had to spend Amber to forge, which, like spending Amber to forge with Key Abduction like a peasant should be a meme, but but I would have been able to do that, and it would have been fine, but still, he didn't know that. I didn't even know that before my turn started. And so I definitely think the right choice for him was to auction off the Nepenthe Seed. I don't think it mattered in the end. But, but I know people kick themselves. I kick myself over those kind of things. But, we're all learning. And again, I definitely played better on day 2 than I did on day 1. Okay, and then round 7, I played against a Worlds Collide build, and this is the other guy. I don't quite remember his name. Part of it is he didn't tell me his name till the very end of the game. You can watch Ewok JR streamed the kind of tail end of this game, but so he was playing a Worlds Collide with 3 Infernuses and a ton of ways to discard. So he had a rigged lottery, 2 subtle chains. Just a lot of ways to knock cards out of my hand. A Bornet, which never fired, thankfully. And I got a little lucky that he never discarded the combo pieces, and so I was able to just keep building up in my discard and then fire. And he on his final turn stole Amber instead of killing Duskwitch, and he was kind of kicking himself over that because Duskwitch obviously was really beneficial on my Mars turn. But again, I think I had enough stuff stored up in my hand that it ended up not mattering. But yeah, it was just a matter of he was not he didn't he needed to discard, he needed to randomly discard certain things and then Infernus them, and it didn't happen, and so that saved my butt, and I was able to fire and win. And all right, so that was day 1, and I thought, well, day 2 is going to be rough because I know that I have a chance against Jason. I beat him in the prelims. Against Jared, I have a tough matchup. but I think it's possible. And against anybody else, who knows? We'll see. So the first game I played was against Brad, playing a triple Battlefleet key abduction with a very rushy Untamed. He had, I think, 2 Dust Pixies, a Full Moon, a Chota Hazari, a Key Charge, a Nature's Call, Nepenthe Seed. So it's possible to forge 3 keys. If you have that whole Untamed suite in your hand, you can probably forge 3 keys there, right? Like Full Moon, 2 Dust Pixies, Chota Hazari, that's 1 key. Play your other creatures, get some amber. Nature's Call, your Dust Pixies, and your Chota Hazari, forge another key that way, and you've probably still generated enough to forge the third one with Key Charge, or you can Nepenthe Seed the Nature's Call. It's just crazy. So I knew that was insane. I knew he could probably do it out of Mars too, and then a Logos with a library access, which is great for hand shaping. I also have seen Flaming Hobo play Miss Minity, and I know how that can do the Mars combo out of the Logos with the library access, and so that can be kind of crazy. He ended up I went first, and then he ended up playing Library Access turn 1 and just playing a few cards and stopping. And I wonder if I asked him, and he felt pretty confident he was right to keep it, but my question was, would it have been better to actually mulligan that away, because he had that plus 2 battle fleets. And I think probably part of the decision there is he my deck is so aggressive that he felt like I have to keep this and play aggressive. I can't wait to have this fire midway through my draw, which is fair. But what ended up happening is he did the Logos. It was not a great Logos turn, and then his next turn he did the Mars, and he played all 3 battle fleets that turn, didn't draw all the way through his deck. And so at that point, all 3 battle fleets are in the discard. And he went to check for key 1. And I recognized at that moment I did not have the setup to fire my combo. And I could have pushed into it, but I couldn't. I would have to get really lucky for it to fire off. And I thought, I just have to do a setup turn and hope that he doesn't have the Untamed to kill me. Because if he had the right Untamed in his hand, and he had a big hand, if he did the right Untamed, then I lose. And he went Untamed, and he played stuff out, and he forged 1 key with Key Charge. So that was his second key, because he had been in check. So he forged 1 naturally, forged 1 with Key Charge, passed. And at that point I knew, okay, I actually can take another setup turn. So I did, because the likelihood of him being able to fire again is pretty low, or to have another key cheat in hand is pretty low because he didn't draw. And then he took a Logos turn, went to check, and then I fired and won. So I think part of what went wrong there is he did the combo too early. And I think that was because he was scared of me firing. So not necessarily wrong on his part, except in hindsight. And I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe the Martian Gen deck wins 9 times out of 10 in that matchup anyway. I actually don't know. I knew I was real scared and very thankful that it didn't fire. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. Definitely a nail biter. So then in semi, and they actually had adjusted things in the tournament software to make sure that you wouldn't face in quarterfinals. You could not face as the player who had fought through the losing bracket. You would not face in the quarterfinals the player who had beat you in the bottom. So at first round in the quarterfinals, each of the 4 undefeated players will play one of the players who already has a loss. And so, but again, they guarantee you will not play the person who knocked you out of the winner's bracket. in semifinals, I did play the person who had knocked me out of the winner's bracket. I played Jared, and this game I had learned a bit, and so I played to make sure I drew through. And there was a really interesting turn, in my opinion, anyway, where so the problem for me was well, first of all, I should say I got Heart down early enough, and then I did not even forge key one, and so I had Heart down. It was providing a lot of backstop for me to be able to take my time setting up. The danger for me is if he gets his snudge game going, and I finally took a turn where I played Heart. I played a really good Logos turn, dropped a lot of things on the board, played not played Heart, played Shark, and I sharked the Snudge, and I actually went through and I killed all of my creatures, and then the Shark last, killing some of his other stuff that was I didn't like as well, and then finally, literally the last iteration, I kill the Shark, it goes to discard, and then the next card I flipped over was Logos. So that would have, if that hadn't flipped over, or if that had flipped over earlier, I would have had to leave Shark on the table, which would have been bad. I realized after the fact, but now Shark's in the discard, and I burned an Nepenthe Seed to bring the Shark back to my hand, because if I don't do that, I think his next thing he does is play Infernus Jar, and I lose. So, because you Infernus the Shark, Jar the Martian Gen, and now I'm in trouble. So I realized in hindsight I actually got lucky waiting to hit the Shark until last. The right play would have been Shark Snudge, discard one card, and then bring the Shark back. But I got lucky, but I think that was a misplay on my part. And then I was able to combo after that. So yeah, that was pretty intense. But I definitely feel like getting the Heart down early, and then learning to actually play some of my cards to make sure that I could get the setup out, and then not playing stuff that could get marked, made sure that I could win that game. But it was touch and go. And again, I don't think Jared made a single mistake in that game. Okay. Then I got to the finals and had to play J Power again, which again is pretty scary. His deck is very scary, and he's an excellent player. And I think so. He thinks the deck I played is pretty favored in that matchup, and I think that's true. But I don't think it. I think it can lose for sure. And so it was scary. In game one, I misplayed by starting a combo turn in Logos where I did Igor and then Helperbot, and I used I was trying to see, can I fire the combo out of Logos, because it's possible to like Helperbot, Martian Gen. The only thing is you have to make sure you keep killing your helper bots with like bouncing Death Quark. So it'd be like helper bot, bouncing Death Quark, Martian Gen, draw the helper bots back, helper bot, bouncing Death Quark, Martian Gen, helper bot, to get all 6 helper bot instances so that you can play like 2 Martian Generosities and a Key Abduction. And I should have played Full Moon early. Anyway, I think I played wrong not helper botting Full Moon right away. But maybe I don't know. Maybe I was right actually. I'm not 100% sure. So anyway, so I ended up having to end up just dropping Heart at the end of that turn. It was a good turn. I did a lot of stuff, but I ended up dropping Heart to avoid losing, and then had to wait to set up the combo and finally fire in Mars. And I was able to do that. I think he Infernused 1 Martian Gen, but I had the Nep Seed, and so I was able to finish it out. And then in game two, but it was a pretty grindy game. So then in game two, I had a what I would call a pretty bad draw, and had to just keep hand shaping throughout the game. There was an interesting. I got to the point where I had enough stuff, enough Mars stuff to do the combo. I had just finally drawn into everything I need. I have stuff in archives. I have stuff in hand. I'm ready to go. And he drops Jar, and I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to play some of the Mars stuff to get through to to Heart to save my butt. Hope he doesn't kill too much stuff, and then set up the combo. Um, but he jarred Heart and not Martian Gen, and so I was able to combo out. And so um, in hindsight, if he had been able to see my hand, he would not have done that. He would have jarred Martian Gen. However, here's I think his logic is, and actually, if he had jarred Heart, he would have. I'm trying to think if I had a helper bot. If he had jarred Heart, it would have been pretty rough for me. No, if he had jarred Martian Gen, it would have been pretty rough. I think I might just lose. And here's why. He was on check for key 3. And so he was on check for key 3. And so if I don't have if I can't fire the combo and I can't play Heart, I pass turn and he wins because I have I don't have very much Amber control in here. However, from his perspective, I get it because Heart is one card, and I had like 3 or 4 cards in archives plus a full hand. Heart is one card. To fire the Mars combo, I needed several cards, not just Martian Gen. I needed to have Martian Gen plus the Harvester to generate enough Amber plus some other stuff, and so I think from his perspective, it's do I want to bet against you? Do I want to bet? Do I want to prevent you from playing one card or one card that's part of a whole combo that you are less likely to have enough of? And so I think that's why he chose Heart. He got unlucky. I didn't have Heart. I did have the other stuff, and so I was able to combo out that turn and win. Uh, but again, I asked him about it afterwards, and he thinks he made the wrong call. I think if he could see my hand and archives, he made the wrong call, but he couldn't. And given what he knew, I actually think he probably made the right call. But it's tough, and that's where I mean, Heart is amazing because Heart got got J Power to jar something other than Martian Gen. I mean, that's incredible, right? Like that's insane value. Um, so in hindsight, Heart was relevant in almost every game, whether it was on the table or not. Um, and because in some cases it prevented forging key 3, and in other cases it just changed the ways people played in ways that opened up opportunities for me. Dysania had a very similar effect. I never got a big Dysania hit. I think the most I ever knocked out of an archives was 2 cards, and one I had killed to put back into archives with Biomatrix backup that turn. Um, so I never got a big Dysania hit, but it meant people made different choices. And actually, I think Brad in game in the quarterfinals would have played a different setup. He would have played different. I think if not for the Dysania, I think he would have left battle fleets in his archives and waited a couple more turns. And the Dysania pushed him to fire earlier. So yeah, I think overall those end up being pretty important cards. We'll see. J Power said, okay, well, I guess I have to rebuild. So he's going to have something different next time we see each other, which I think will be at Worlds. He's going to have something different, and I probably need to have something different as well. We'll see. It'll be really interesting, but Uh, it was fun. I learned a ton. I hope for some people this was maybe a little helpful, inspiring. Um, you know, definitely this kind of thing can be beat. It's not an auto win by any means. Uh, it needs good support. It needs to be played well, and I'm sure there are people who could play it even better than me. Um, and it's definitely defeatable. And I'm sure Jay Power is going to be working hard to figure out a way to defeat it, and you might as well. And if so, then I hope to see you and at a future event. And good luck. Um, all right, that's it. Thanks so much if you've watched or listened. I really appreciate your time. Hope you enjoyed. I had a lot of fun talking about this, and I hope that you'll get out there and forge some keys.